Thank you, Larry. I'm really honored to be here and to listen from you as much as after I finish my presentation, because we are really going through a very peculiar time in Saudi Arabia. I will sum up my talk by saying exactly what we need today in Saudi Arabia is some proper form of check and balance. But I will explain that in about maybe 15 or 20 minutes of my talk. But that is the summary of it. What we need right now with this young prince who wants to reform or change Saudi Arabia, which we support, is just some form of check and balance. I presume all of you know Saudi Arabia, but I am confused about my country, even though I have lived all my life there. It is as if you are watching the Tudors in fast forward. You know, all the 3 seasons at one night. That's what is happening in Saudi Arabia today. What I find very strange personally about me, that Impious, the young crown prince of Saudi Arabia, is doing exactly what I called for as a reporter, as a columnist, as an editor-in-chief. He's doing the things I got fired for. He's purging corruption, and every Saudi writers call for that. He is destroying extremism. He's limiting the power of the princes. The power of the princes, they exploited the country. We the Saudis, we see them as 10,000 little kings walking around us. He is for women's rights, allowing women to drive. Now it's an issue that was brought up in every discussion about Saudi Arabia. It is now behind our back, and it's an issue today, women driving. Paving the way for social freedom and allowing youngsters to enjoy life, allowing entertainment, music, maybe cinemas too. All of those basic things were an issue that we debated daily in our newspapers. Things that Americans have taken for granted for years, and not only Americans, Egyptians and Syrians and everybody else were taken for granted, but it was an issue for discussions and debate. How much music can we have? Is music on the oud halal, or electronic music is halal? We debated even silly issues like they will ask the Mufti to give a verdict about electronic form of music because it doesn't have the instrumental aspect of the traditional oud. Externally, he is reinforcing the role of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is being more assertive and pushing Saudi Arabia to face Iranian sectarian expansionism. To me, as a citizen of Saudi Arabia, I want that. I want to be safe from Iranian sectarian expansionism. But I feel that he is doing the right things the wrong way. Why? Because his style is hasty. He's as if he was a surgeon who wants to operate in 10 patients on one time. In 5 years, he elevated to power. Not only to power as a crown prince, but to control almost every important aspect of political and economic and militarily matters of Saudi Arabia. He is the one who decided where to invest billions, where to build cities. He's in control of everything, from Aramco IPO, from Aramco administration altogether. He's in charge of Aramco, to the Aramco's IPO, to whether to invest in the smallest American company here in California, to the largest American company. He is the one who called the shot about all of that. He's also the decision maker on war and peace in Yemen, in Syria, in Qatar, in Lebanon. Lebanon is the latest misadventure that he jumped into. And I would like to take Lebanon as an example. because it is still fresh in our mind. It backfired on Saudi Arabia. Yes, Lebanese, even Saad al-Hariri, the Prime Minister of Lebanon, will agree with Impious that Hezbollah needs to be tamed down. We Saudis want Hezbollah to be tamed down. But there is a need to study or to analyze the way Saad al-Hariri's resignation was conducted in Riyadh. It is an example of the hasty style of Impious. As a Saudi citizen, I see the Iranians' expansionism as a threat, a true threat, especially for somebody from the city of Medina. And the Iranians are still living in a mid-centric mindset. They're still dreaming of expanding and creating a new empire, but with the 21st century tools, like having proxy parties in foreign countries, like having militias that are licensed by a legal president like Bashar al-Assad to fight in his country. They are not violating the law, the international laws. They are welcomed by Bashar al-Assad to fight in Syria, but basically they are mercenaries, sectarian mercenaries who are fighting and killing Syrians. There's about 85,000 of them who are fighting in Syria today. And I would like to see someone confront that. But again, MBS is raising his voice against Iranians' expansionism. He feels that President Trump is there to support him. But again, what is his plan? That's again why there is a need for a proper check and balance or some democratic form in Saudi Arabia to develop such proper plans that will not fail. So whatever he is doing to counter Iranian threat, it is not working. So he needs to revise the strategy. But how can he revise the strategy when there is no environment of debate? There is no discourse in Saudi Arabia to discuss success and failures. Even when it comes to reform. It's a great plan he put for us, 2030. But even when he had to revise the plan, the news of the revision came from the Financial Times, not from local Saudi paper. He did not went to the Saudi public and said, hey, I have to revise the plan. Or he did not even give a press conference where he explained where the plan had to be revised. The purge and corruption, it is important. There is no way that his plan or our plan of the future can succeed without a purge and corruption. Actually, I wrote an article when I was in Saudi Arabia where I asked the question, can reform in Saudi Arabia succeed, economic reform without political reform? And I argued at that time that it worked in China, it worked in Rwanda, and it worked in Vietnam. So it could work for Saudi Arabia. But I'm sure it is way more complicated than that. In China, decision-making process, you all know that, is way more in consensus than what we have in Saudi Arabia. So I still feel that there has to be an open discourse to discuss those important transformational issues that we the Saudis are going through. They are so important, so existential, that if it failed, it might be maybe we'll not have another chance in Saudi Arabia if this opportunity fails. The plan is great, but it requires some form of a check and balance. I couldn't express a countering opinion while I was home, or any other opinion. Therefore, I chose to leave the Saudi Arabia to express my thought. I was already banned when I left Saudi Arabia from writing my weekly column that I had regularly kept for over 15 years. I was banned from speaking to foreign media. I was even prohibited from tweeting or posting on Facebook by order of the government. That I received by phone. I really felt insulted when I received that phone call, and when it started to sink in, I felt very insulted that even though I am one of the well-known writers in Saudi Arabia, the government can shut me down by a phone call. I'm sure Americans or Europeans cannot imagine that to happen to him. But and maybe that what pushed me to come here, or just to feel free. I did not have a plan when I left Saudi Arabia in last summer in last June, except just to find a place where I can think freely. I did not have the right to object, nor to go to court when I got that phone call, as the order was not issued by the court. Moreover, I knew they can, with just another phone call, impose more sanctions on me, the least of which could be banning me from travel, or even arrest. 6 months after I was banned, and that was rough being, it was endless time when I was at my home doing nothing. I began to feel that the narrow margin that I had is getting narrower. I learned from friends that they had to sign pledges at the state security. They were called to go to the state security, where they signed 3 pledges. Pledge number 1 is to delete previous tweets they made. Pledge number 2, to support the government in the government policies. And pledge number 3, which was pledge number 2 was not to contradict government policy. Pledge number 3, which was the hardest, to support government policies. Those friends of mine, most of them are independent. They signed the 3 pledges, but they couldn't fulfill the later. They chose to go silent. And there is still many of them are silent. But not all stayed silent. They stayed silent, but they ended up arrested later. Like a friend of mine who I met before his arrest, 2-3 days before his arrest, his name is Assam al-Zamil, a Saudi economist. If he was free, he could give a beautiful presentation about the Saudi economy here. I met Assam in Washington when he was visiting last September, and he was on a government mission. But Assam was independent all throughout. He was active in social media. He was supportive of Arab Spring. That is a decisive thing in Saudi Arabia. If you are a supportive of Arab Spring, you will be labeled as anti-state somehow. So Assam was one of those persons who was supportive of Arab Spring. Even though Assam was also, myself and Assam, we attended Prince Mohammed bin Salman gathering once. Assam attended twice or 3 times. So we were part of the Saudi intelligentsia who were seen by the Crown Prince. But for some reason, Assam, when he arrived in Saudi Arabia 2 days later, he was arrested, and he's still arrested. I had, compared to Assam, I had a better luck. I saw it coming when I began to see that margin, the narrow margin, and even being quiet at my home is getting narrower, and I decided to leave. At first, I chose to stay away and watched from a distance, but I couldn't. The news of the arrest in Saudi Arabia spread. That was in September, when the Washington Post called me and asked me to write an op-ed. Without hesitation, I said yes. Later, I wondered, why did I say yes? Why did I agree immediately to me asking I found myself answering this at the end of the op-ed I wrote for the Post, and I'm going to read it here. It was painful for me several years ago when several friends of mine were arrested. I said nothing. I did not want to lose my job or my freedom. I worried about my family. I have made different choice now. I have left my home, my family, and my job, and I am raising my voice. To do otherwise would betray those who languish in prison. I can speak when so many cannot. I want you to know that Saudi Arabia has not always been as it is now. We Saudis deserve better. That was the end of my op-ed. And I was referring to an incident I went through in 2009 when a friend of mine and an associate of mine were arrested, and I was an editor of a paper, and I just couldn't say anything. I felt really ashamed. I felt in betrayal that when Abdullah al-Hamid was arrested, when Musa al-Garni were arrested, I felt ashamed. But I had no choice. I was an editor of a paper. And if I objected to that, I could lose my job, and just like everybody else. And even if I objected, I wasn't in a position to change, to influence the government decision. But this time, I'm in Washington. I am safe. How could I stay silent? So I chose otherwise, and I started speaking. And that's what I've been doing since. Unfortunately, the government treated me, or government circles treated me as if I shot the king, God forbid, and I ran away. As I am a traitor. They start attacking me in the media. They start attacking me in the social media. About 30 articles were written about me in Saudi press, with all kind of slanders. But this is the intimidation, the mindset that we are having right now that is scaring everybody from speaking out in Saudi Arabia. But again, in Saudi Arabia, our choices are limited. We cannot elect a king every 4 years. And if Prince Mohammed bin Salman make it as a king, and I'm sure he will, in 2 or 3 or 4 years, he can rule Saudi Arabia for another 50 years. So I sincerely hope he can succeed. Not for me, as I have lived my life and I made it for myself, but really I'm concerned for my children, for my grandchildren. Thus, it is important for him to succeed. But for him to succeed, there has to be political reform. Right now, nothing in the horizon about political reform in Saudi Arabia. There are rumors that he is considering an election. Someone claimed that he heard that from him. I did not hear that from him, but someone claimed that he heard that he is considering having an election in Saudi Arabia, and he was just wondering whether to have all of the body elected, or half, or a third. But I ruled that out, because the way he is conducting business, his style, he very much believes in himself, and he will think. And this is the prevailing thought that you can find in the Arab world, especially among liberal Arabs. They begin to lose hope in democracy, or to assume that Arabs are not educated or ready for. Arabs are not ready for democracy. You will hear that very often. I mean, in your next trip to Saudi Arabia or to Egypt, you might come across this statement: Arabs are not ready for democracy. It is insulting for us, the Arabs, and it is not true. If you don't allow democracy, nobody is ready for democracy. Democracy, people learn it by practice and by rule of law. And probably Impious also follow the same analogy, that Arabs are not ready for democracy. That if I introduce democracy into Saudi Arabia, it will jeopardize, it will slow down my reform. I will have people in the parliament who will dispute and argue about this plan or that plan, and I have the best plan for the people. That's what he believes in. I also began to see a different style in governments in Saudi Arabia, moving from dynastic model to a vertical model. Saudi Arabia, after the passing of the founder, King Abdul Aziz in 1953, it was ruled by consensus among brothers. There would be one among equal who will be king, but the other brothers, they will share power and the power making decision process with him. But now we are moving to a vertical authority. All consisted around Impious alone. Not even a brother of his is close to him. And he has an interesting PR machine that is producing Photoshop images of him where he stand up and show the founder, King Abdul Aziz, a picture of King Abdul Aziz sitting on a chair in an advanced age, and MBS is showing him a map. It's a very smart message that this young man is taking the helm from the founder of the kingdom. So he is being created as the second founder. Actually, 2 days before the arrest of my former boss, Al-Walid bin Talal, he sent me a text message. And he said, Jamal, you must return to Saudi Arabia. Enlightened, I like him for saying that, enlightened minds like yours should be with us, helping my brother Mohammed bin Salman in establishing the 4th Saudi state. 2 days later, Al-Walid was arrested. This text message Al-Walid sent to me, he sent, I'm sure, to probably 10,000 people, because it is his habit, he does that. And I use also this story to contradict the claim that Mohammed bin Salman had to arrest Al-Walid and Mit'ib and others to ease his climb to the throne. There were no opposition to him. There were no challenge to him. Al-Walid was very much supportive. Mit'ib was very much supportive. No one was challenging him. And he said that to Thomas Friedman in that interview. But what is interesting here, it is that the concept of the 4th state. Saudi Arabia witnessed the Saudi dynasty had three dynasties or 3 states. The first one that was brought down by the Turkish-Egyptian invasion. The second one failed before the turn of the century, the 19th century, due to civil war. And the 3rd state was established. It is the current one that we live in, by Mohammed bin Salman, grandfather, King Abdul Aziz. But he is now creating the 4th state. And the term 4th state is also being used repeatedly in local media. I will finish with the following, that I see a repeat of Jamal Abdel Nasser, Egypt. Jamal Abdel Nasser was very smart, very ambitious, very patriotic, loved his country, and wanted to transform it into the future, to transform it into to become a better nation, to ease poverty. And Mohammed bin Salman wants the same thing. And they're almost the same age when they reached power. Even Nasser is about 4 or 5 years older when he came to power in Egypt in the 1952 coup. Impious is 32, about 4 or 5 years difference. But Nasser believed in himself. And even the smart advisors around him learned to say the things that Nasser wanted them to say. And we all know how the story of this ambitious leader, who many Arabs still glorify him, how miserably he failed. And the Egyptians still are paying for the faults of Nasser. I'm afraid for the same thing for Saudi Arabia. Mohammed bin Salman is sincere, he's doing the right things for us, but he needs to broaden the base of leadership. More consensus. I would love to have a parliamentarian system, but I'm sure somebody will say the Saudis are not ready for that. But we need some form of Islamic or secular, some form of a check and balance. I will end, I will end with the three challenges that Impious is going to face, and what require a proper check and balance system. First thing, high expectation. He made young Saudis, who are the majority of his supporters, and they are the majority of the people of Saudi Arabia, touch the sky. He is promising them a better future, he's promising them jobs, he's promising them futuristic cities, so he has to fulfill. This is challenge number one. Challenge number two is his top-down approach. I think there need to be a debate about that in Saudi Arabia. Top-down approach cannot work in Saudi Arabia. It is the top-down approach is the Dubai model. And when I see him talking about that futuristic city in the north of Saudi Arabia, and the Red Sea Island projects, and the entertainment city in the south of Riyadh, again, this is top-down approach. This approach is costly. It failed in Saudi Arabia in his lifetime. And Mohammed bin Salman today has to deal with two cities that are failing. King Abdullah Economic City in the West Coast and King Abdullah Financial City. He had to find a feasible business practice for those two cities. So why would he build another futuristic city while the infrastructure in the city of Riyadh and Jeddah is falling? He needs to spend more time in bringing the culture of work to the Saudis. The culture of work has died in Saudi Arabia after the occupation of foreign labor. 80% of the labor force in Saudi Arabia is foreign. So by our addiction, we the Saudis, to foreign labor, we lost the culture of work, the ethics of work. I think we need maybe a generation to fix that. So he needs to spend more time at fixing the problem, the problem of foreign labor and the culture of work. And that will lead me to the third challenge, which is unemployment. Unemployment is huge and serious in Saudi Arabia. It is as serious as it is in Egypt or in Morocco or any other country. Saudi Arabia is not that rich country like the city-state in the Gulf. He has to address the problem of about 20% of the population who are jobless, male and female, and that means he has to deal with 4 million people who need jobs in Saudi Arabia. This is a serious, it is a ticking problem. And the problem of unemployment, it began to produce socio-economic issues, such as racism, such as crimes, and it's going to grow more. I don't know when it will hit the most, 4 or 5 years, I don't know. But if he doesn't solve this problem, and this problem doesn't get any smaller. Every year, 250,000 young Saudis join the workforce, and they want jobs. So those are the three challenges that he's going to face other than the foreign issues. And it will be much better for him not to have this responsibility alone on his shoulder, but to share it with us, the people of Saudi Arabia. Something interesting is happening also, that Mohammed bin Salman is breaking two important elements in the legitimacy of a Saudi ruler. He's changing rule of the game. It is the royal family. He's breaking that structure. We don't know where is it going to lead with the arrest of royalties and downsizing their authority and their influence, and the religious establishment. They were the two pillars or the two entities that support the royal or the king legitimacy. So if those two are weakened or, let's say, becoming less effective, who else he has to look for? It will be us, the people. So maybe somehow without him planning to, eventually he will have to look at the people to seek legitimacy or to seek support. But when he does that, it has to be, maybe it will be a beginning of a discourse or a discussion about some form of sharing power with him as a king of Saudi Arabia. Thank you very much.